Thyme. Welcome to the Menlo Circus Club. My name is Michael Adams. I'm the executive chef here, and this is our cooking essentials class. Quick shout out to Dirk Zander, who's behind the camera, and Robin Saline, who's doing all our editing. Usually we start with questions, but there weren't any questions last week. So if you have any, please reach out to me. My email address is michela@menlocircusclub.com. So today we're going to be making coq au vin, and very super classic recipe. So why coq au vin? A few things. First of all, I absolutely adore French cuisine. I adore classic French cuisine. The first third to half of my career was strictly devoted to classical French. It's really the only cuisine in the world that has what I like to call a royal cuisine and a normal peasant cuisine, for lack of a better word. This recipe is really great because it's going to be cumulative of a lot of things we've done in the 3 previous episodes. So you're going to see a lot of the same techniques, and it's going to be nice to bring all that stuff together. And third, the versatility of this recipe. If you were to sub out the chicken for short ribs and sub out the stock for beef stock or beef broth, you would have a braised short rib. It's a nice introduction to braising. You can do the same with lamb shanks and chicken stock or beef stock. And it's just, as summer's coming up, we're going to be doing a lot less braising at the club, so I wanted to get a braise in before we move into the summer ingredients. So we're going to go ahead and get started off, and let's talk about coq au vin traditionally first. So the whole reason behind coq au vin is the farmers or the people in the rural areas would take the oldest rooster that they had that really wasn't producing anymore, for lack of a better word, and they would use him, and they would need to cook him. They would need to do something with him, so they would slaughter the rooster, butcher him, and then that meat, since it's going to be an older animal, the meat's going to be a lot tougher. It's going to be more fibrous. It's going to have more sinew in it. So what they would do, they would take that meat, they would butcher the chicken, and then they'd soak it in red wine overnight. And what red wine does, like it's got acid in it, and that's going to help to break down the meat and soften the meat, so that it's a little bit more palatable, so it has a better texture. Nowadays, we don't really do that anymore. You can use a whole chicken if you like. If that's the direction that you want to go, please reach out to me, because there's a couple of tweaks we're going to have to do on the menu. I'm just going to use chicken thighs and legs because that's a really nice braising ingredient. Really easy to work with, lots of flavor, and we're going to get the same effect. So we're going to start off, and what we want to do, we need a fairly large pan because we have a lot of ingredients that need to go in here. If you have an oven-safe pan with a lid, please use that. If you don't have an oven-safe pan with a lid, use a large pan, and then we're going to need a large casserole dish to finish everything in. So, hot pan, oil. We're going to season our chicken. If you notice when I cook, I don't use a lot of black pepper. The reason behind that is I treat pepper more as a spice than as a condiment. I don't think it needs to go on everything. I use it more for red meats, darker fish like tuna, just because I think it could be a little overwhelming. So our pan is getting hot, and if you remember back to episode 1, when we seared chicken breasts, this is going to be the exact same process. We're going to take our hot oil, wait till we get a little bit of smoke on it, and we're just going to add our chicken thighs in there, and then we're going to turn them down and let them brown. Exact same process as we did with the chicken breast. Remember, once you get that oil hot, the medium heat is your friend. We're going to turn it down to about medium heat, and we're just going to let those slowly start to caramelize. While those are caramelizing, we're going to be using some bacon today. And this is going to be first pro tip of the day. At home, I don't cook bacon in a pan. I don't cook it on the stove. I always cook my bacon in the oven on a baking dish with parchment. The If I'm just doing strips of bacon, I'll lay the strips out, put it in the oven about 350, 400 degrees, depending on the type of oven it is. It usually takes around 20 to 25 minutes. I find that you get a more consistent bacon. You can absolutely nail the temperature. If you like your bacon crispy, you can take it there. If you like it more on the red side, that works too. So we're using sliced bacon. I spread it out on a sheet tray with parchment under it. I put it in a 350-degree oven. Took about 18 minutes, and then when it came out, I reserved the bacon fat. The way I did that was with a towel in my hand, I poured the bacon fat off into a heat-proof container. The reason being is the majority of flavor in bacon is actually in the fat, and we're going to be using a little bit of that fat later on, so I want to set that aside. So back to our chicken. We're just going to let these cook and caramelize so we have a nice, beautiful color on them. So we've got some really nice color on our chicken. What we're going to do is we're just going to flip them over, and we're going to do the same thing to the other side, focusing more on this area up here. We don't want to really get that meat too brown, because that meat will start to get tough and kind of a little too fibrous. So we're going to give that about 1 or 2 minutes on that side, and then we'll move on. So we've given our chicken legs just a couple more minutes on that side. Remember, you don't want too much color. We're just kind of giving them a little bit of a sear. We're going to take those out of the pan, keeping that skin intact. And if you notice, some of that chicken fat is actually rendered off. That's a little bit more fat than what I want to be using. So I'm going to dump about half that out of the pan. And if you remember back to our mushroom risotto, we're going to sear some mushrooms. So hot pan until it starts to smoke. And we're just going to keep them moving in the pan until they have nice caramelization on them. Caramelizing our mushrooms a little bit, medium-high heat. We got some good color on there. Remember that you really want to bring out that mushroom flavor that way. Try to use the biggest pan possible. At this point, we're going to add what is called mirepoix in cooking terms. Onions, celery, and carrots. And we're going to sweat those down. And once again, what's sweating is we're just going to cook them over kind of a low to medium heat until they're a little al dente. And the reason why we're doing that, because especially with the onions, what gives onions their bite is basically an acid. And we want to cook some of that acid out, otherwise it's going to completely overwhelm the dish. At the same time, I'm going to add my garlic, because that needs to sweat down as well. And the fastest way to do this is to actually put it on low heat, cover it, because that steam is going to trap it. It's going to start to heat it up faster. One quick note on the onions. The recipe traditionally calls for pearl onions. There were no pearl onions at the store, so I just used a regular onion. You can go either way. Traditionally with coq au vin, there's not going to be any celery or carrots in there. It's going to be mushrooms, garlic, pearl onions, bacon, chicken, and that's pretty much it. The choice is up to you. I like to use the mirepoix in there because honestly, it stretches the dish out more. It feeds more people. It's a little bit more cost effective. And I don't have to prepare a vegetable side dish if I'm serving them. So we've let these vegetables sweat for about 5 to 10 minutes. Just it really all depends on your stove, how much you have. And if you take a look at them, they still have their integrity, but they're just going to be a little bit softer. And that's really what we want. If you have any doubts, grab an onion, taste it, and if it has still has some crunch or some acid to it, cook it some more. And at this point, we're going to add our red wine. So 2 cups of red wine. It's a very wine-heavy dish, obviously coq au vin. So let's talk about 2 things. A, why did I not marinate my chicken in wine overnight? Really, I don't think there's a need to. The chicken legs sit in the braise long enough that I think they soak up that wine flavor. And having an acid on quality chicken for a long term of time changes the protein strands a little bit, and it tightens them up, so what you end up getting is possibly a dry chicken. So although that would have worked in the past when you had a chicken that was older, tougher meat, I just don't really see the need for it anymore. And then types of wine. Traditionally, coq au vin is made with a Bordeaux, without exception. If you go to France, and they make your coq au vin with a cab or any other type of wine, it's not technically coq au vin. There's actually different names for it. Coq au vin jaune, which is my personal favorite because it's made with vin jaune, which is just a beautiful wine. There's a version made with white wine, coq au vin blanc, coq au Beaujolais. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways to do it, and it's very region specific. Use what you have. It's still going to be delicious. If you don't like red wine, use white. Creates a really, really nice, just beautiful white wine chicken broth sauce. It's up to you. So with the wine, I want to cook it almost all the way out. And the reason being is, the reason we cook wine, it's got a lot of acid in it, and it also has a good amount of alcohol in it. And we want to cook that alcohol out. We want to cook that acid out. We want just the pure wine fermented grape flavor. So it's only going to take a couple of minutes. At this point, I'll crank my stove all the way up to high. This is one point where medium heat is not your friend, unless you have lots of time. And we're just going to reduce it down, reduce it down, reduce it down. So at this point, we've cooked out maybe 75% of our wine. Once again, all we've cooked out is the alcohol, some of the acid, and some water. And we're gonna add our thyme and our bay leaf. If you have fresh thyme, please use it. If you don't, just half the amount in the dry version. We're gonna add our chicken to this. Just snug them in there, kind of push them down into that mirepoix, onions, and wine. That's beautiful. And we're gonna add our chicken stock. So this is, you can use chicken broth out of a can. This chicken stock I made at home. Whatever works. And once again, vary your broth depending on what kind of meat you're using. Like I said, this works well for short ribs. You can do it with turkey. You can do it with a lamb shank. There's 1,000 different things, but really what you want is for your stock to match. Honestly, you could braise short ribs in chicken stock and it'd still be delicious. So we added our chicken stock to this. We're gonna bring it up to a boil. We're gonna cover it, and then we're gonna put it in a 300 to 400 degree oven. It's hard for me to tell you the amount of time. I'm gonna say minimally, absolutely minimally. If you have the best oven in the world, it's gonna take about 35 minutes. If you don't, it could take as long as an hour. If you don't have an oven safe pan, you would basically put your chicken in a casserole dish, your chicken stock, your wine, and your veg you would have brought up to a boil. You would have poured that over the chicken, foiled it, and then put it into the oven. So we're gonna wait for this to cook, and then we'll come back.
Can you do that in a slow cooker, chef?
I don't see why you wouldn't want to. Really, the ideal temperature for braising is closer to the 200s, because at 150 degrees is when collagen actually starts to fully break down. So the closer you can get to that, the better off you are. So yeah, absolutely, you can do it in a slow cooker. I think that'd be great. Okay, so the time took a little bit longer than I thought it was going to initially. It took probably closer to 45 minutes, so at home you're probably gonna look at an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. And let me show you what you're looking for. The sauce is starting to come together. But if you take a slotted spoon, and you take one of these chicken breasts out, I'm gonna flip it, or I'm sorry, chicken thighs, and you give it a little push. You can do that with a spoon if you like. The meat is starting to come across away from the bone. And you can kind of almost get that spoon all the way through if you were to push it all the way through. So at this point, the chicken's done. What I'd like you to do, put the lid on it, put the foil back on it, and just let it sit on the stove for about 10 minutes. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna let it cool down a little bit so you can handle it. And it's also gonna help the chicken to absorb some of that moisture. The protein strands are gonna soften up a little bit. So once it's sat for about 10 minutes, we're going to take our chicken legs out and we're gonna finish our sauce. If you have a nice colander at home, you can put that over a bowl once your chicken legs are out, and you can strain your sauce into that bowl. Just be super careful. If you're not comfortable doing this, take that slotted spoon and just spoon everything out. But what I want is just, I want to get back to that stock and that red wine. So we've got that strained, and I'm actually going to measure this out. And the reason being is I like to be pretty precise when I finish the sauce. Should be around 4 cups. So we'll measure it out, and this is going to tell us how much roux we want to make. So it's about 3 3/4 cups. Because I like to be precise with my roux, I'm actually just going to top it off with a little bit more chicken stock. If you don't have more chicken stock, just add a little bit of water to it, and it'll be fine. So we're going to take that, put that back in our pan. We're going to start to heat it up. We're going to turn this into a beautiful sauce. So in another pan, we're going to start making our roux. So if you remember from the first episode, we made a bechamel. And with that bechamel, we had a ratio of 1 cup of milk to 1 tablespoon of flour to just under a tablespoon of butter. I really like the texture of that sauce, so we're gonna go with that exact same ratio. And it's always better to make your sauce a little too thick, because you can always thin it out. But if you make it too thin, there's only so much thicker you can get it. So while that stock is heating up, I'm gonna take just under about a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons of butter. Now, the reserved bacon fat that we had, about 2 tablespoons of that. And then here's a little twist. Traditionally for a roux, keep dropping things today. Traditionally for a roux, you just use a fat and a flour. We're going to do a little bit differently. We're going to use 50% flour and 50% cocoa powder. And what that's going to do, it's going to add kind of a chocolatey background to that red wine. It works really well with chicken. It works well with the braised short ribs. And the cocoa powder uses the same ratio, and it works exactly as a flour would when it comes to tightening stuff up. But it gives you the cocoa with the red wine, chocolate and red wine pair well together. We're going to melt our fat. And we're going to add this in, just like in that first episode, and we're going to cook that roux just a little bit. Remember, all we're doing is cooking the flour a little bit, because that flour is made with a raw grain, and we kind of want to get rid of that flavor. So once you see it start to sizzle, once you see it start to boil, we're going to add our stock. We're going to add a little bit. And we're going to whisk the lumps out. Add a little bit more. Combine. And then we're going to add some more, the rest of it. Now, really important with this, to get it to the texture we want, a roux only fully activates when it comes to a boil and then is cooked. So we're going to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to reduce the heat down to about low, and we're gonna cook it for a minimum, an absolute minimum of 10 minutes. And at that point, we're gonna know the true texture of what that sauce is gonna be. After that, it'll tighten up a little bit more, but not much. One other thing, you thought I forgot about the bacon. I did not forget about the bacon. I never forget about the bacon. We're gonna add our bacon to this and start to get some of that flavor in there while it's cooking. So once again, we'll bring this up to a boil. We'll turn it down to a simmer. We'll cook it for about 10 minutes and then we'll finish everything. Okay, so we've given this about 10 minutes, and if we look at our sauce, it's got a nice texture to it. If you want it thicker, this is nappe, remember, if it just coats the back of a spoon. If you want it thicker than that, next time just a little more room. If you want it lighter, a little less room. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna season this sauce now, and we'll start with a little bit of salt, and probably a tablespoon. It's really hard to say. Just remember, use your taste buds. Now, I'm always talking about acid in sauces, especially in really rich sauces. The acid I'm going to use in this, I'm going to use just straight red wine. There's enough acid in red wine that's going to make it pop, and we're going to bring some of that fresh red wine flavor back to the dish. So a couple of tablespoons, however much you like, a cup, however much you like red wine. And now, while this is cooking, I'm gonna return everything to our large pan. We'll start with our chicken thighs. Now, those of you that have made coq au vin before, you'll notice that this recipe has a few more steps. To me, it just offers a little bit more control, and that's why I like it. Usually everything is made in one pot, but this, we're able to control the texture of our sauce, we're able to control our vegetables, and add our veggies in here. Time, if you want, take your bay leaves out. If you don't want to, that's fine too. Double check seasoning in our sauce one more time. The acid's good. We're gonna pour this over. In our pot, and what we're going to do is we're just going to put it on a low heat for about 7 to 10 minutes, just so all the flavors kind of merge together. You can cover it. Just keep an eye on it. Make sure your heat's not too high. You don't want it to burn. And after that, we are done. I would take the lid off, let it sit for 5-10 minutes before you serve, just to kind of let it cool down just a little bit. But it's pretty much the finished product. If you look at the gravy, the sauce, it's got a nice texture to it. It's not too thick. It's not going to be too overwhelming. And then however you plate this is up to you. At my house, we'd serve it in the pot with a side of mashed potatoes, steamed rice. I personally prefer it on buttered vegetables, or I'm sorry, buttered noodles. And I think that's more the traditional French way of serving it. If you want to do it individually plated, you can put a little pile of your starch on the plate, put some of the veg down, take a beautiful piece of chicken, put that on top, and then just come back with a little bit more sauce. And the sauce is nice because it just barely coats the top of the chicken. It's not too thick. If it happens to be too thick, just add a little bit of water to it. So as far as wines to serve with this, really your best bet is going to be the same wine that you made the dish with, preferably a nice Bordeaux. If you use a cheaper wine in the dish, you know, a nice mid-bodied red wine, a cab, kind of on the higher end, or like I said, a Bordeaux. So coq au vin. Next week, we've got kind of a crazy week. We're going to reopen for some to-go stuff. Please look online, check out our menus. So our video next week's going to be a little bit different due to time constraints. We're going to focus on knife skills, how to cut vegetables. So if there's anything you'd like me to show you how to cut, shoot me an email, Michela, and we'll add it into our video next week. See you then.